Way back in prehistoric times, I was interviewing a guy by the name of Mark Spitz. You may have heard of him. He was a linebacker for the Saints. And what he said to me was, in this sport, success in practice is 90% physical and 10% mental, which of course is obvious. You have to pay your physical dues. Can't lie on a couch and spill Chips Ahoy cookies on your face and get good. You have to suffer. You have to sacrifice. Then he said, when you get to meets, success is 90% mental and 10% physical. But he was wrong. Because as far as I'm concerned, once you get to meets, you have the training base, you have the muscle memory for good tactics and good technique. Your success is all mental. It's directly related to what your kids focus on and say to themselves both before and during races. Okay, and specifically before. And what I'm talking about before, it could be a week before, it could be days before. Because I'm one of these people that believes races are won and lost before the start. Okay, if you focus on the wrong things, if you got the wrong kind of thoughts going on in your head, it's gonna change your body physiology because you're gonna get nervous. And when you get nervous, your muscles gonna tighten, your breathing's gonna get faster and shallower. And if you're really nervous, the blood flow in your body is gonna change. It's gonna leave the extremities, your hands and fingers, toes and feet, and go to the deeper muscle groups, which is cool if you're being chased by a wild animal in the jungle. Last time I checked, there's not a lot of wild animals in the pool, okay? Because those three physical changes devastate a swimmer's performance. I don't have to tell you what tight muscles do to your stroke mechanics. Shortens your stroke, which of course is the kiss of death. Faster, shallower breathing. I had a kid come to me, because a lot of the work I do is one-on-one with specific swimmers who are having performance problems. This is a kid who used to do 7,000, 8,000 easy in practice. First race of his meet, this was the problem he came to me with. First race of the meet, let's say it was a 200. He's fully rested, tapered, shaved, you name it, got a tech suit on, turns into the wall after the 100, and he's gassed. What is he, out of shape? No, that's stress. If you focus on the wrong things, you're gonna make yourself anxious, your breathing's gonna change, and then you're not gonna have any endurance. And the last thing that happens for a lot of swimmers, and we're gonna talk a lot about that in this talk, is if my hands and feet are cold because I am freaking out, I can't feel what I'm doing. And if you can't feel your stroke, you're in big trouble, okay? So when I say races are won and lost before the start and what you focus on dramatically affects performance, let me give you an example that's a little closer to home. Over the years, I've been doing some research on peak performers. And one of the things that I've discovered is that under pressure, they're spontaneous and creative. And I'd like to demonstrate that. I want to give you kind of a hands-on experience of what I'm talking about. So here's what we're going to do. In a second, I'm going to pick a volunteer, the way they do in today's Army, and I'm going to have you come up here, and on the back of my business card, I've written a very general statement. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to be creative and spontaneous under pressure. Now, I used to do this exercise a lot, but I had to stop. And you'll understand for obvious reasons. Because I never knew who to pick. Sometimes I wasn't sure if I should pick someone in the front who's hanging on every word I was saying, or someone in the back. I didn't know if I should pick someone who was really making eye contact with me, or somebody who was very slowly shrinking in their seat. And I have to admit, sometimes I've made some really nasty choices. But let's just go ahead with it anyway. What's your name?
Ben.
Ben, okay. I don't want to pick you. I just want to know what your name was. All right, so let me ask you a question. Ever since I've started speaking, have you noticed a change in your physiology? Anything change? Anything change in terms of what you're thinking about right now? How many of you are thinking about, oh my God, get me the hell out of here. I don't want to listen. I don't want to be here. What if he picks me? I mean, I'm sure there's a few of you that are sitting there thinking about, oh yeah, let me get up there. This is going to be cool. But I bet the vast majority of you are doing something different. Yes? Okay. See, the really cool thing about stress is, and this is the good news about stress, is situations don't make you nervous. How big the race is doesn't make your kids nervous. Who they're swimming against doesn't make them nervous. What's at stake doesn't make them nervous. The good news about nervousness is we cause it ourselves. And the reason I say that's the good news is you can learn to change it. Okay? You can learn to change what you're focusing on and what you're thinking about. Now, a lot of what I'm going to say this morning is based on the work I've been doing one-on-one with athletes across every sport. Swimming is my biggest sport. I probably do 65% of my work nationally and internationally in this sport. Okay, and one of the things I've learned, because I specialize in working with kids who have specific repetitive performance problems. And in swimming, it's pretty basic. You go faster in practice than you do in meets. You go faster in off events than best events. You've hit a plateau and you haven't dropped time in, I don't know, a number of years. Okay, or kids who throw up before races or are so freaked out they don't perform well. And a lot of what I'm going to say today is based on that work and what I consider to be the principles of peak performance. Okay, and as a coach, it is in your best interest to integrate this stuff into your training. You do not have to be a sports psychologist to teach kids how to focus on the right things, to teach them how to deal with last-minute negative thinking and doubts. See, the problem in our sport here is that people take out mental toughness training during taper, a week or two before the big meet. Okay, now that's okay. That's relatively useful. Relatively. The problem is, these are skills. This is a skill area. This is not just for athletes who have specific performance problems, because if I'm saying that races are won and lost before the start and that success is at a meet is all mental, if you don't work on this part of the sport, then what's going to happen is your kids are not going to perform well. And if you only save it for taper time, might I suggest organized religion and prayer as a more effective way of dealing with it? You hope that the kids are going to do well. And you work too hard with these kids to let that happen. So you don't want to leave this stuff to chance. So one of the key things that I like to talk about, which is really, as far as I'm concerned, the basis, the foundation of mental toughness, and actually it's the foundation of good coaching, is teaching kids how to become aware of what's going on. Okay, what's going on physically, what's going on mentally. Because you can't make changes, you can't correct mistakes, stroke technique-wise, mental mistakes, unless you're aware of what you're doing wrong. Awareness is the key to change and the key to mental toughness. Let me give you an example from my sport, okay? When I say my sport, I coached tennis for 22 years. I was a Division I tennis player, #1 tennis player at my school. And I was giving a lesson one time to a guy who wanted to learn how to hit topspin. Okay, so in tennis, there's 3 kinds of strokes you can hit. You can hit flat, where you come across. You can hit slice, where you start above and come down. Or you can hit topspin, where you come from underneath and you come up. And it's a much aggressive, harder ball to handle. because when the ball bounces, it kicks up. This was a guy who wanted to learn how to hit topspin on his backhand. Every time he went to hit it topspin, his racket head would go way the hell over his head, his wrist was over his head, and as a consequence, he'd have to slice down. I met with him 3 or 4 times. I couldn't get him to break that habit. He goes to a tennis camp, spends a week there, comes back all excited, says to me, I finally learned how to do it. I'm hitting topspin now. And I said, great, let me hit you a few balls. I hit him 15 balls in a row, and every single one of those balls, his racket head is over his head, and he's slicing down. And he comes up to the net, and he's smiling at me, and he says, I'm doing it now. And I said, and he said, right? And I started to chuckle a little bit, and I said, do me a favor. And again, I'm looking for awareness. I want you to describe to me, I want you to teach me how you keep your racket head low. Tell me what you do, but I want you to do it in slow motion, and I want you to close your eyes. Because really what I wanted to get him to do is connect with feel. Because obviously this guy had no awareness of what he was doing. And your kids need to be focused on feel if they're going to go fast. I'm going to talk a lot about this. There's basically 2 places swimmers can focus before and during races. And one of them is in their head, on their thoughts. You're not in your body when you're doing that. You have no control. The other is on the feel of your movement. So here's what he does. Okay, he closes his eyes and he says, okay, when I see a backhand coming, I turn my shoulders and I bring my racket back and I tell myself, keep your racket head low, keep your racket head low, keep your racket head low. I said, freeze, don't move. Open your eyes. And he looks at his arm and he starts to freak out because he had zero awareness that that's what he was doing. When you're making changes with kids technique-wise, your words are important, but unless they feel what they're doing wrong and have the ability to feel the right way, they're not going to be able to change. So awareness is absolutely critical. And the main thing that we want to talk about this morning is awareness of the mental differences between fast and slow swims. Because I really do look at this as a technique issue. This is not about kids having mental health problems or any of that stuff. Inconsistency in this sport is mental. Now, I'm not an idiot. You got to pay your physical dues. Sometimes you're going to have kids who don't perform well because they're not working hard. I'm making the assumption that they've done the work, okay? And then when you see kids sometimes performing really well in meets and then other times falling apart, that is not random. That's directly related to what kids focus on and what they think about before and during races. So what's really important is they have an understanding of the mental differences between fast and slow swims. You can't correct mistakes unless you know you're making them, and you can't know you're making them unless you know what you're supposed to do mentally and what you're not supposed to do. So I'm going to give you all a couple of lenses that I want you to use and look through to understand your swimmer's performances. Okay, and the first one is up here, and it has to do with the part of the brain you're in. And I'm not going to start sounding like a psychologist, because actually, legally, I'm not a psychologist. So we're going to make this down to earth. When a swimmer has a great race, they're in one particular part of the brain. And when they struggle, they're in a completely different part of the brain. So and incidentally, we're going to make these slides available to you. We'll email them to you if you need them. So the brain is divided into multiple parts, but in this diagram there's only 3 parts. And you can tell that this is an anatomically correct version of the brain, right? Because I work really hard at this and I want to be really authentic. So the brain's divided into 3 parts: front brain, midbrain, hindbrain. Each part of the brain controls different functioning in a kid's life, in and out of the pool. Our front brain's job is thinking. So if I have a crappy warm-up and I'm behind the blocks and I'm thinking about how I never swim fast when I have a bad warm-up, which incidentally is a crock, okay? That's just a myth that kids perpetrate. Or I'm thinking about, my last race. Or I'm thinking about the person who's next to me who I know is at least 10 or 15 seconds faster than me, okay? Then I'm in my front brain. And during the race, if I'm starting to focus on how I feel, and when I say how I feel, my arms and legs are starting to feel like lead, so-and-so is pulling ahead of me, I'm in my front brain, because anytime your kids are thinking, that's the job of the front brain. The midbrain controls emotions. Happy, sad, frustrated, confident, nervous, whatever. And our hindbrain controls what we call knowing. And that's not IQ, that's the knowing that comes from doing something over and over and over again. For example, what I'm doing right now is hindbrain. Flapping my lips, hopefully making identifiable vocal sounds. What you're doing if you're taking notes, that's hindbrain, writing with a pen. Riding a bicycle, driving a car, flip turns, anything we've done a lot of, the hindbrain takes over. To understand the differences between peak performance and problematic performance, when a kid has a lifetime best time and when they add 10, 15 seconds, we're going to look at how your front brain and your hindbrain work, or what I call process information. We're going to leave the midbrain out of this discussion for now. So let's see, where are we?